Hi, I'm Susan Brecher, team leader of the Food Processing Evaluation Team at the Center for Food Safety and Applied Nutrition. And this is Robyn Jones, Compliance Officer within the Office of Compliance.
I'm Emily Weyl, a Consumer Safety Officer with the Food Processing Evaluation Team. I am a moderator for the Food and Feed Safety video. I will be providing some additional information for this content.
In this presentation, we're going to discuss the regulations for low acid and acidified shelf-stable canned foods, commonly referred to as the LACF regulations. LACF regulations require that manufacturers of these foods register their facility and file their scheduled processes with the FDA. We will discuss how to comply with these regulations in further detail in this presentation. The best way to start is with definitions. First, the definition of a low-acid canned food is a food with a finished equilibrium pH that is greater than 4.6, a water activity value greater than 0.85, and thermally processed in a hermetically sealed container. Definitions pertaining to low-acid canned foods can be found in the Code of Federal Regulations, or CFR, 21 CFR 113.3. The references to the CFR are indicated on the slides to help you find specific information. Acidified foods are low-acid foods to which an acid or acid food has been added to lower the pH of the product so that the finished equilibrium pH is 4.6 or below. They also have a water activity of greater than 0.85. Once a low-acid food is acidified, it does not become an acid food. It remains an acidified food. This is a consideration when repacking product. A repacker of acidified products may need to file as well as the original acidifier. Definitions pertaining to acidified foods can be found in 21 CFR 114.3. Examples of foods excluded from these regulations are acid foods, foods with a water activity of 0.85 or below, such as peanut butter, naturally fermented foods, such as some olives, foods kept under refrigeration all along the distribution chain, which includes frozen foods, carbonated beverages, and foods containing more than 3% raw meat, red meat and/or raw poultry, or contains 2% or more cooked meat, red meat and/or cooked poultry in the formulation. Meat and poultry products are under the jurisdiction of the U.S. Department of Agriculture, or USDA. When looking at these regulations, it's helpful to know the public health issues surrounding their development. In the early 1970s, several life-threatening botulism outbreaks occurred as a result of inadequate thermal processing of commercially prepared low-acid foods in hermetically sealed containers. This led to the establishment of 21 CFR 108, the Emergency Permit Control, and 21 CFR 113, thermally processed low-acid foods packaged in hermetically sealed containers, or what we call the LACF regulations. In the late 1970s, after these regulations were established, there were several incidences of botulism outbreaks in acidified foods as well. So in 1979, a separate regulation addressing acidified foods was developed, 21 CFR 114, acidified foods, along with an acidified addition to 21 CFR 108.25. There are three regulations that are specific to LACF and acidified foods. 108, where you find the requirements for facility registration and process filing. 113 for LACF, and 114, the acidified foods regulation.
21 CFR 117 should be mentioned as well, since it contains good manufacturing practices for all food manufacturing, not just products that are covered under 108, 113, and 114.
Compliance with the applicable regulations is necessary for all food manufacturers, both domestic and also foreign processors, in order to export their product to the United States. We will discuss each of these regulations in more detail, beginning with 21 CFR 108. In 21 CFR 108, Emergency Permit Control is where you will find the requirements for commercial processors of LACF and acidified foods to register their establishments with FDA. Once registered, a facility will be given a Food Canning Establishment Number, or an FCE number for short. Bear in mind that this registration process and number is complying with 21 CFR 108, not with the Bioterrorism Act that was enacted in 2001. Registration to comply with the Bioterrorism Act is a separate registration process that gives you a unique registration number. Therefore, LACF and acidified food manufacturers will have two registration numbers, one FCE number and one bioterrorism registration number. Here's an example of the form needed to register a processing facility. Registration allows the FDA to identify manufacturers of acidified and/or low-acid canned food products. In Section 108, you will also find the requirements to file product processes in addition to registering a facility. Each unique product, container size, process system must have a process filed with the FDA as well. It contains all the processing information necessary to ensure process adequacy and should be developed by a competent process authority. Each filing is identified with a submission identifier, or SID number, that corresponds to the date it was created and numbered sequentially. Process filings can be submitted by paper or electronically. The benefits to filing electronically include ease of submission, instantaneous delivery, and the ability to view all filings, enabling the manufacturer to do any necessary housekeeping, such as deleting processes no longer used.
There are 4 process filing forms that capture the scheduled process information for acidified and low-acid canned foods. The 2541D for low-acid retorted method, the 2541E for acidified method, the 2541F for water activity formulation control method, and the 2541G for low-acid aseptic systems.
Please remember that the SID is not an administrative form, but rather a technical form that is reviewed for adequacy to ensure food safety and should be developed by a competent process authority or the process source. 21 CFR 108 also spells out the requirement that processors of both low-acid and acidified products must process their product in conformity with at least the filed scheduled process. This particular section of 108 also gives FDA the authority to request that processors provide any information concerning processes which is considered necessary to determine the adequacy of the scheduled process. Process source information relating to specific scheduled processes must be established by people having expert knowledge in thermal processing or acidified foods, depending on the product. If a processor doesn't have an expert on staff, FDA recommends that you seek assistance from an independent processing expert. Another important component of 108 is the requirement to establish a recall plan. Processors of LACF and acidified canned food products must have a plan on file that outlines the necessary steps if a recall is needed. Part 108 also requires that operators of retorts, thermal processing equipment, aseptic processing and packaging equipment, and container closure inspectors be under the supervision of a person who has attended and successfully completed a school that has given instruction in retort operations and container closure inspections for LACF products, and/or a school in acidification, pH control, and heat treatment for acidified food products. This training is meant for the workers who directly supervise the operation of the processing line so that they know how to comply with the good manufacturing practices of these regulations. Please note that this training does not certify anyone to design scheduled processes. If you have critical factors listed in your filed schedule process, identified by a competent process authority, you are required to monitor and record the values for those critical factors. All processing records must be maintained for 3 years at an accessible location. Robyn?
Now let's move on to 21 CFR 113, thermally processed low-acid foods packaged in hermetically sealed containers, otherwise known as LACF. There are some definitions in 113 that deserve special attention. Commercial sterility is a condition achieved by the application of heat which renders the food free of microorganisms capable of reproducing in food under normal, non-refrigerated conditions of storage and distribution, and viable microorganisms, including spores, of public health significance. A hermetically sealed container is designed and intended to be secure against the entry of microorganisms and thereby maintaining the commercial sterility of its contents after processing. A scheduled process is the process selected by the processor as adequate under the conditions of manufacture for a given product to achieve commercial sterility. This process may be in excess of that necessary to ensure destruction of microorganisms of public health significance, and shall be at least equivalent to the process established by a competent process authority to achieve commercial sterility. Many manufacturers use an operating process which is in excess of the minimum requirements set forth in the scheduled process in order to minimize deviations. Subpart C outlines the specific requirements for each type of retort system. Examples of some typical retort systems include vertical or horizontal still steam retorts, water immersion and water spray or water cascade retorts. As new processing technologies evolve, FDA identifies new critical factors needed to deliver a minimal process for that system. New technologies are covered under 21 CFR 11340J. According to regulations, all retorts require an indicating mercury in glass thermometer as a means to monitor retort temperature. FDA recently finalized an update of Part 113 that now allows the use of alternative temperature indicating devices instead of mercury in glass thermometers. This final rule is available on FDA's website. Each retort must also have a temperature recording device. The purpose of a temperature recording device is to document that the filed scheduled process has been delivered. Without documentation, there is no evidence that an adequate process was delivered to the product. Subpart D gives instructions on how to test for container integrity. Why is this important? Testing for container integrity is necessary for preventing recontamination after thermal processing and maintaining commercial sterility. Post-process contamination can be just as deadly as inadequate processing. A qualified container closure inspector must visually examine the top seam of a can or the closures of any other type of container at intervals of sufficient frequency to ensure there is proper closure, and these observations must be recorded. Once again, without written documentation, there is no evidence that adequate inspections were made. Destructive tests, such as can seam teardown for double seam cans, must be performed by a qualified individual, and the results must be recorded at least every 4 hours. The next part of 113, Subpart E, deals with production and process controls. One very important point is that all processes must be established by an expert on thermal processing requirements. This includes identifying all critical factors that are considered necessary to assure commercial sterility. All critical factors identified in scheduled processes must be measured and recorded. Another key point to remember from this section is that there must be a system in place to ensure that non-processed product does not bypass the retort. This is called product traffic control. A mistake in product traffic flow was the cause of the most significant outbreak of botulism in the United States, when cans of product were filled and sealed but failed to enter the retort. This section requires that the initial temperature of the contents of containers be measured and recorded with sufficient frequency to ensure that the temperature of the product is no lower than the minimum initial temperature specified in the scheduled process. Adherence to 21 CFR 11389. Process deviations have been shown to be a problem for foreign facilities. Any process less than what has been filed with the FDA is considered to be a process deviation, even if it is something that can be easily approved by a competent process authority. Minimum initial temperatures, process times, and retort temperatures less than what have been filed are considered process deviations, even if only by 1 degree or 1 minute. Any critical factor identified on the process filing form that is not adhered to is also a deviation that must be identified and evaluated. Product that has been manufactured under a process deviation must either be correctly reprocessed or set aside for further evaluation by a competent process authority. Record review must be done within 1 working day in order to determine any process deviations. Deviations and the disposition of affected product must be recorded in a separate, accessible file. Subpart F details all the records that must be maintained by a facility and how long those records must be kept. Records must be kept for a total of 3 years, 1 year at the processing facility and an additional 2 years at an accessible storage site. Susan?
Part 114 is the regulation that deals with acidified foods, as we talked about earlier. To recap, acidified foods are low-acid foods that have a normal pH greater than 4.6, to which an acid has been added to reduce the pH to 4.6 or below, and have a water activity greater than 0.85. Just like LACF scheduled processes for acidified foods must also be established by a competent process authority. Acidified foods must be manufactured, processed, and packaged such that a finished equilibrium pH of 4.6 or lower is achieved within the time designated in the scheduled process. This time should not exceed 24 hours. If acidification takes longer than 24 hours, the product should be kept refrigerated until the finished equilibrium pH is achieved. Acidified foods must be thermally processed to an extent sufficient to destroy the vegetative cells of microorganisms of public health significance and those of non-public health significance capable of reproducing in the food under normal storage conditions. There also must be a sufficient control to ensure that the finished equilibrium pH is being achieved and maintained. Please note that pH test strips can only be used to monitor pH for products with a finished equilibrium pH of below 4.0. In all other cases, a potentiometric method must be used. Requirements for container integrity test are not as extensive for acidified foods as FDA requires for low-acid foods. However, it does not mean that container integrity for acidified foods is any less important. Containers must be tested and examined often enough to ensure that the container protects the food from leakage or contamination. The manufacturer can decide how this is done. Deviations occur when the operation deviates from the scheduled process and/or the equilibrium pH is higher than 4.6. However, it is a deviation if the finished maximum equilibrium pH is higher than the filed finished maximum equilibrium pH, even if it is 4.6 or below. That is a deviation from the scheduled process. If a deviation occurs, the processor has 3 choices. You can reprocess by a process established by a competent process authority, thermally process the acidified product as a low-acid product, or set aside the product for expert evaluation. Once again, the reoccurring theme is that records must be kept. Robyn?
Container codes must be marked on both low-acid and acidified canned products. These codes must identify where the product was packed, what the product is, and the year, day, and time period when the product was packed. This information is needed in case there is a need for a product recall. It is up to the manufacturer to determine and explain the code. The code must be visible to the naked eye, and if the container does not permit the code to be embossed or inked, the label must be legibly perforated or otherwise marked, as long as the label is securely affixed to the product. Be sure that the code stays on the product at all times. FDA determines compliance with the regulations we have just discussed in several ways. We reviewed filed processes for process adequacy. For a product imported into the United States, our FDA investigators conduct entry reviews to make sure that processes have been filed for products that are subject to the regulations. The field can also conduct a field examination and collect samples. Finally, and most importantly, FDA conducts inspections of facilities. Due to the large number of facilities importing product into the United States, FDA is now committed by law to increase the number of foreign facility inspections to ensure the safety of these products. After hearing all about the requirements of the LACF and acidified food regulations, You may be wondering how FDA determines how foreign processors comply with these regulations. As we described earlier, FDA reviews submitted process filings to determine if they are adequate to ensure food safety. FDA can ask processors for additional process support documentation. Registration, filing, and process source information are necessary for firms to comply with the requirements in 21 CFR 108. LACF and acidified products can be refused admission to the U.S. commerce if processors are not registered and/or if processes are not filed with FDA. In addition, if FDA collects samples of LACF or acidified product upon entry at the border and discovers a potential health hazard or significant critical factor deviations, the processor and product may be placed on import alert, otherwise known as detention without physical examination. If a firm is placed on import alert, future shipments of that processor's product will be detained and not allowed entry into the United States. Foreign processors can also be placed on import alert if significant violations of the LACF and/or acidified regulations are observed by investigators during an inspection of their facility. A processor that is placed on import alert can request removal from the alert by submitting evidence of their corrective actions to FDA for evaluation. FDA can then determine whether or not the processor's corrective actions are sufficient to substantiate removal from the alert. To learn more about import alerts, you can review the FDA training video on the FDA Import Food Safety Inspection System. The website is shown on the slide. We hope that this presentation answered your questions about what, why, and how to comply with the LACF and acidified food regulations. We encourage you to check our website periodically for new information concerning these regulations. Thank you.